Welcome to Proud Product Peeps. Our guest today is Deane Barker, VP Experience Consulting at Valtech. Deane is a prodigious reader, four-time author, resident of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and all-around great guy.
All right, welcome to Proud Product Peeps. I have Deane Barker here as my very first guest. Thanks for joining, Deane. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, if I am your first guest, my friend, that does not bode really well for this podcast.
I thought it would be all uphill from here.
You'd get the worst one out of the way, set the bar real low.
No, I figured I would go to the best one. Everybody else has to level set against that.
I'm setting the bar for everybody else, so you're welcome, everyone.
Exactly. But, Deane, I've known you for almost 10 years now.
Probably.
And instead of having to do a bunch of different research on you, because I know you so well, I wanted to let everybody know a few different things about you. One, I don't think you want people to know this, but you are a really big teddy bear. You actually like people, even though you might not show it, but you really like people, and the way that you love your family, your community, it's actually quite inspiring, and it has been since I've known you. You are also so smart, but it's funny because you hate politics of all kinds. You hate internal politics, you hate external politics. You don't like it when, all of those different things that are beyond just the face value of something goes on. But most important, and I had a question about this, most important and most interesting, I think, is that you are an arbiter of fine cheeses. And you actually have a blog where you go through and you post pictures and you post different things. And I wanted to know from you, can you identify what your favorite cheese plate has been since you started this?
So, 8 or 9 years ago, I ordered cheese plates. Love cheese plates, always have. 8 or 9 years ago, I was having lunch with a friend, and I took a picture of it because I was just compelled to take a picture because they're so pretty. And he goes, "You should start a photo blog." And so that night, I literally went out and I bought the domain name, OMG, that's a fine cheeseplate.com. And for 8 or 9 years, I've posted pictures of cheese plates. There's close to 300 of them out there now. In terms of the best cheese plate, I'm going to say as a general category, the best quality of plates I have ever gotten has been at a place that used to be in the West Village in New York called Murray's Cheese Shop, or Murray's Cheese Bar. Murray's Cheese Shop was kind of the retail store. Murray's Cheese Bar was the restaurant, and they had the 5 cheese flight, and the cheesemonger, you would just give him a general theme and he would pick, I say he, it was always a guy for me. He would pick very, very specific cheeses. They also had my favorite beer. They had a beer called Allagash White, which you can only really get in the Northeast. And it's out of Maine. And so I would have the 5 cheese flight and Allagash White from Murray's Cheese Bar, which every time I went back there, I tried to prepare myself. I was like, it's not going to be as good as you remember. Just calm down. And then every time it was better than I ever remembered. But the sad thing is that it closed. It closed in the West Village. They moved it out to Queens somewhere, which is tragic. But Murray's 5 cheese flight at Murray's Cheese.
Now, would it be just cheese or full charcuterie?
Just cheese. Just cheese. Well, I think you could get charcuterie. I always tell the guy to make it soft. I like the soft cheeses that you can spread on crackers. And he would come out and just tell you all about the cheeses. And then once for a birthday, like my 49th birthday or something, my wife made me a cheese birthday cake. She ordered like a half round of London Fog. It's like a blue cheese from Murray's, and then put candles in it.
Wow.
Cheese birthday cake. So I know nothing about cheese. I don't claim to know anything about cheese. I just love cheese plates. I think they're so fun to look at, and they're such a mix of like food and art. I just think they're amazing, but I have no skill whatsoever.
The one place I brought you near me, Kindred and Davidson, the only statement that I saw was it said, "Too much aioli."
That could be, but no, I remember. Was that the place with the milk bread?
Yes.
That was lovely. My one and only trip to Charlotte. There was a lot of aioli on that cheese plate, though. I do remember that. It was bitter.
All right. So, I'm a huge fan of Strength Finders.
Sure.
Strength Finders is absolutely about how do you double down on the strengths that you have as opposed to always focus on the deficiencies. And I've used it throughout my career, not only to help identify individuals on teams and what their strengths are, so make sure to play towards those, but also, my own. My strengths, as listed by Strength Finders, strategic, relator, activator. Activator is basically like, hey, when are we going to start this? We have what we need. Let's go ahead and do it. What would you say are your one or two strengths from Strength Finders? And how do you think that they've helped you in your career?
So I'm looking over the list of Strength Finder strength. They have 4 different themes, right? Executing, influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking. Influencing is a good theme for me. Also, relationship building. I think I've done a really good job building relationships. But if you get into like the specific strengths, communication. A friend of mine, Rasmus, he used to be the CMO of a CMS company called Magnolia. He once told me that my greatest strength was explaining things to people and getting people excited about content technology and getting them to think larger and more broadly about the things that they could do with content technology. And so, I'm going to say communication is probably one of the great strengths that I would love to double down on. And I'll go into my role in my current job and how it kind of plays into that. So I think that's pretty close. And then relationship building, relator. I think I've done a good job in kind of working within my industry, building relationships in my industry. I just switched jobs recently in the last few months, and it was purely a relationship thing. I ended up in the job I'm in specifically because multiple relationships I had, both the person that referred me to the job, and then when they were kind of checking me out, they talked to people, and lots of people knew me. And so, yeah, those 2 things, communicating with people and building relationships, I've done a pretty good job at.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, when we brought you on board in 2019 to then Episerver, it was the same type of thing. But it's also interesting. I mean, those 2 pieces, and definitely the influential and the relationship piece. I mean, you have the pulse of what's going on in the market. You talk to a lot of customers. You understand the technology. You can figure out the use cases. And I think that you've taken that and you've been able to figure out how to work with sales and product and engineering and all of those pieces. I want to know, how do you do that? I was always amazed at how much you knew of what was going on in the market and technology wise, and all of those different aspects. Like, what do you do on a daily basis in order to stay up to date on those things?
Here's the thing. I never hesitate to reach out to somebody, and I've always wanted to be, somebody once told me, is be the person that when somebody sees you calling on their phone, they smile and they're happy to answer. You want to be that person. And I've always made a point to try to reach out to people, even when I don't need something from them. If I see like an interesting thing about a city that I know somebody lives on, like you and I both know somebody lives in Columbus, Ohio. So an interesting news article about Columbus, send it to Rachel because she lives in Columbus, Ohio, and that's some way that we can connect. And you don't just reach out to somebody when you need something. If you just reach out to somebody when you need something, you are going to be the person that they don't answer the phone for. And you don't want to be that person. And it really comes back to, and this sounds really dramatic and idealistic, and I don't mean it to, it really comes back to caring for people rather than industry or jobs. I really care for people first. Love people, want to do the best for other people. I want other people to be super, super successful. And I think if you concentrate that, everything else just kind of, falls in line. I don't know. That sounds really idealistic, but
no, but it makes sense. And you're also a prodigious word viewer or other word reader. You can see by the books behind you, whether it shows up in the final video or not. It's just, you must read a ton of what's going on in the market and the world and all that stuff to be able to form the opinions that you have. And I think that's, quite impressive.
There was a great book years ago called Understanding the News by a woman named Doris Graber. And she talked about schema theory and the way that we understand things. Everybody has a schema about any particular issue. And what she means by that's a framework on which you hang information. You have a framework about your industry or about your technology you work in that you're constantly putting information onto. And whenever I read about something new in the industry, something new about content management, content technology, I'm always asking myself, I'm like, how does this apply to me? Where does this fit? In my head, I kind of have a 4-step phase of how the content lifecycle. And I honestly ask myself, like, what phase would I put that in? How does that relate to other things? What other parts of my industry? does this affect? And I think I'm constantly building out this schema, as Doris Graber wrote. I'm building out the schema of my industry, and I'm always asking myself, like, where does this specific information fit in? How does it affect everything else? How does it affect the larger framework? I feel like I'm always trying to do that, and maybe that helps me get a well-rounded view.
You know, you and I have talked over the years. When we brought you on in 2019, we were saying clearly this is what we want to achieve. We want to get back into being known as the best in the market in content management systems, and it became difficult over the couple of years for you to figure out if you were successful or not. We had all these conversations. I think this is where Strength Finders comes from myself. You also mentioned a book, Power of Positive Deviance, and maybe talk a little bit about that, because those two pieces really form this topic, and what you can be proud of, and how do you focus and understand the successes, the outcomes, and not just the negative aspects of what occurs in a job. But maybe talk a little bit of Power of Positive Deviance for a moment.
Yeah, so great book. A lot of people don't think about positive deviance, but what that is that instead of looking for what went wrong, look for what went right. Look for multiple situations of where something went well and was positive, and then ask yourself what they have in common. And there's a book called The Power of Positive Deviance, and it's about the concept of positive deviance, just as kind of a method of framework of study and research. But in particular, it follows the story of a scientist nutritionist that went over to Vietnam and was studying malnutrition in children in Vietnam. I don't know what time period this was, but he determined that instead of looking for malnourished children, he should find well-nourished children and find a series of well-nourished children and then ask himself, what do they have in common? So it's not find what's going wrong. It's like find what's going right. I had a talk I was doing last year called, I forget, Palaces of Innovation. And it was about how how good content teams work and the practices that they have in place. And what it was kind of like a positive deviancy study. I've been working with content teams for 25 years. And I kind of asked myself, the good content teams, the real good ones, what are they all doing right? Like, what is the characteristic that you see in all the good examples? What is the positive deviance? And I don't think that people do enough of that. We tend to always ask ourselves what went wrong. We don't ask ourselves what went right. And by asking what went right, drawing patterns out of that, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and there's something about building confidence. I started implementing, make positivity normal again, because we're just always constantly focused on what went wrong, all the issues of the day, as opposed to talking about the successes. And there is something about, the need to build confidence in individuals, and then you perform better. You don't always look over your shoulder for thinking that you did something wrong. Building on the positives are really important. And so it's really what this is about. Curious if you can identify or multiple proud moments, proud accomplishments that you've had in your career, definitely all ears to hear about it.
You prepared me for this question in advance, and now that I come talk about it, I still feel like wildly unprepared for it. If I look back over my career, I just turned 53 last week, so I feel like an elder statesman in my industry. But when I look back, a lot of people have told me, and I have been very, very proud where people have told me that things that I have written, content I've created has been very, very instrumental for them. And this has happened multiple times. I'm embarrassed to admit, but people have come to me and said, your first book, I read every word of that and it really changed how I think about this. And they've written me on LinkedIn and then made comments to me that things that I've said, content that I've written, kind of the steady stream of content that I've put together about my particular industry has been very, very meaningful for them and has really improved them positively. And I'm very, very proud of that. And lately, I've become low-key obsessed with a guy named Harry Nyquist. Have you seen my post about Harry Nyquist?
I don't think so.
Okay, Harry Nyquist was a Swedish acoustics researcher. He worked at Bell Labs in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And Bell Labs in New Jersey was kind of a research hub for the Bell telephone company. They did a study once of why certain scientists filed more patents than other scientists. So some just filed like a dozen patents, some filed hundreds, and they kind of did a positive deviancy study. And they looked at the scientists that filed more patents and they said, what do they have in common? And you know what they found out? They found out that scientists that filed a lot of patents usually had lunch with Harry Nyquist. And he was just, he did the Nyquist method or something is kind of a thing in acoustic or electrical engineering. So he was a very accomplished scientist. But what he was he was an encourager. He was an enabler. He was a person that would help you talk through an idea and understand the ins and outs of that idea and what might work and what might not work. And just using him as a sounding board, he was an encourager. Using him as a sounding board helped people be much more innovative. And I hope the feeling I've gotten from some people is I was that person for them throughout their career, which was lovely and made me feel fantastic. But I'm absolutely doubling down on that. And I'm to the point now where I would like to spend the rest of my career helping people get better and achieve what they want to. I just got an email just a few months ago from a guy. I've never met him before. He's from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And he is teaching at the university, has teach a course on content management at the university in the Congo. And it was like right after I'd read Harry Nyquist. And I'm like, well, this is a divine intervention. This is my opportunity. Man, I went overboard for that guy. He had some questions. I put him on LinkedIn. I went out to my network. I've invited him to audit my class. And I thought, you know what? I don't know this guy. I've never met this guy. I may never, ever meet this guy. Likely, given where he is and where I am, we'll probably never meet. What can I do to make his life better? What can I do to encourage him and move him along? And I think, and this is getting ridiculously dramatic and over the top, but this is what moves the human race forward. And as someone who is older, I'm beginning to understand that we all have just incredible gifts and our ability to reach out and help someone with no expectation of anything. Just help them achieve something. That's what we need to do. And it's up to, I think, my generation and the older generation in any particular industry. That's what we need to do. And so I'm proud of what I've done in that respect in the past, and I'm prematurely proud of where I'm going in that and what I might do in the future.
I mean, that's beautiful. It's spot on. I mean, I think that knowing you, it is something that I'd second that. On the flip side, I find it very interesting. I would categorize you as, as a confident individual, and to still not be able to confidently exclaim what you're proud at. I mean, this is a problem that we have today, that everybody focuses on the negative and not the positives. And it's very difficult for individuals to talk about the things that they've done well. You've impacted a bunch of different people in different ways, and it's very amazing. You've written 4 books, and you are able to articulate it. That's why you do teaching. Don't you do something over in Denmark once a year? And you like to get out there and proclaim and explain and really get through all these different things. It's beautiful, man.
I was always jealous of the sales guys, though, because the sales guys have a very clear way of keeping score, right? How much product they move, how much they sell. That is the arbiter of whether or not they are successful in their industry. I have always been in a very vague part of the industry. I mean, content creation and media is always kind of a very vague. How do you measure success? You and I had this conversation multiple times. Like the things, I was at Episerver Optimizely for 5 years. How do you measure success in what we did at that time? Part of my remit in my job now is thought leadership. And one of the biggest struggles people have with thought leadership is value attribution. Sure, you're talking about the industry and everything like that, but are you actually increasing revenue for the company? Are you increasing value for the company? It's hard to take what I love to do and convert it into dollars or equate its value in dollars. And business being the way business is, people want to do that a lot. And sometimes that's hard to do. And I know I would always go to you for pep talks. I'm like, are you sure I'm doing the right thing here? Am I providing any value? And it was always hard to quantify. And that's frustrating sometimes.
And so the quantification comes from a binary thing. Did we win the deal? Did we lose the deal? There's a definitive beginning and end. And it's very binary. But there was also the element which is very difficult to measure, which is you're helping the individuals that are customers who are using these various products to be able to better themselves, to be able to improve their own careers, to be able to adopt the product and use the different capabilities. That's difficult to measure, but it was always shown in the number of people that would come to your different talks at the user conferences, the people that would give feedback. And I think that is a critical element, that's your teacher element, that's your communicator element, that you are always able to get across and help individuals with their careers. And it wasn't entirely measurable unless we were to measure retention rates. But that's to me your single greatest value, that you are one of the best individuals at this, at improving people's lives and their jobs so that they could do more with what they need to, because they've learned a lot from you.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. But here's the problem: is you were setting a bar of compliments that you're going to have to continue, because the next guy that comes on this podcast, if you don't compliment them as much, they're going to be like, well, why didn't I get as much as Deane did? But here, let's turn the corner from this thought directly into more in the weeds product management, because what I always wanted to do, I worked in the product group at AppServer and Optimizely. And when it came to influence on the product and the way I wanted to see the product go, I always tended to what I called frameworky features. I always wanted to build kind of building blocks that customers could use to do things with. Like my big thing, especially in the last couple of things I was there, was scripting, less editorial scripting in CMS. And I drove Anil, the CTO, insane, I think, with all my crazy ideas of how I wanted to do this. And I wanted to do this because I like building out the toolbox. My thought was always with editors, how do we empower them to be better and to do better things and to feel more mastery? What I wanted is an editor using that product to push themselves back from the desk and say, I did exactly what I wanted to do. What I created was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have them to feel that power, to feel that mastery. And I wanted to build out like toolboxy features to give them that toolbox. That often didn't mesh with the direction that like the product was going. It was more about like specific features that they could do things with rather than building blocks, because building blocks are not as glamorous. Like to announce, hey, we did this feature and you could take that feature and build this other thing. That's not as glamorous as, hey, you could do this thing. And so when it came to product management, I was all about like strengthening the toolbox rather than strengthening the output and the feature set. I don't know how well that played. So
no, I mean, there's different constituents. And I think, again, from the role that you have today at Valtech, I mean, you help from sales, you help customers, and there's different constituents. There's different needs, right? If you're doing something in a sales cycle, it's something that needs to be probably something that's bigger than an existing customer. I guess from your experience now at Valtech, how is that playing out when you're not? You don't have the direct input into direct product, but you do from an implementation and a sales perspective. How is that playing out today, with what you're doing?
So I was a consultant for 15 years. I started a company called Blend Interactive. And then you relentlessly and heartlessly lured me away to go to work for was then AppServer and became Optimizely. I did that for 5 full years, which in the product space is like an eternity. And then I just left 2 months ago, and I joined Valtech. Valtech is a large company, about 8,000 people, headquartered in Paris. It's a large system integrator. They're one of Optimizely's biggest partners, one of Sycor's biggest partners, a huge Adobe practice. I'm the vice president of digital experience consulting here. And it was interesting to go from consulting into product and then back into consulting. I specifically asked when I was negotiating for the job if I could go back to delivery, if I could go back to kind of billing hours a bit, because I really miss working with customers to kind of mold a product to fix their problems. I had spent 5 years working on the product, and my goal of those 5 years was to have my effort be magnified. I thought, well, if I can make some really productive changes to the product, then everybody that uses it will be happier. But I missed working with customers on their individual solutions. One of my great shortcomings, especially when I was at Blend, I spent 15 years at Blend. I did some wonderful work there, but
this isn't called shortcomings product peeps. It's called proud product peeps.
But here's the thing. I always wanted to be the white knight, right? I always want to strive in and make everything right. And that sometimes worked against us because I sometimes didn't equate that to billables the way I should. But I love coming in and making a customer's life better. I love coming in and solving a problem, not just for my own sake, but I just think of that editor. I think of that person working with that CMS day after day. I think of them, again, pushing themselves back from the desk and going, damn, I just did exactly what I wanted to do. The software didn't get in my way. I didn't have any problems. I call it editorial fidelity. Fidelity is the Latin word, meaning faithful, right? editorial fidelity for me is that when you can allow an editor to create something that is faithful to the idea they had in their head. And I love doing that on an individual basis. And that's one of the things I'm tasked with doing at Valtech, and I'm really enjoying it.
I mean, this is why you're such a great product leader. I mean, you are really focused on the end constituent who's using the product, how to make their life better, and how to get greater outcomes for what they're doing. I mean, you've always had it, regardless of where you've been in an organization. We talked about it, you're always focused on that.
What I always loved at Optimizely is when I would get brought into sales processes a lot. And I do this here at Valtech as well, is to help kind of paint a picture to people about what the software could do and how they could solve a problem. I would always go ahead and solve it. Like when I was at Optimizely, it's funny because right now I'm just getting a lot of my code kind of documented and organized. And there is so much code I wrote just because a customer had a problem and I wanted to see if I could fix it. I had a free weekend. I had a couple Coors Lights. I thought, you know what? I could fix this problem and I could go back to them on Monday and they'll be so excited about this. And I don't know if it's just my self-esteem needed that boost or whatever, but I just loved the idea of showing them. And that happened multiple times. I came back a couple days later and said, hey, that thing we just talked about? Like, I just implemented this and here's what I did. And they're like, this is amazing. I didn't know the product could do this. This will make my life so much better. I don't know, professionally, there's no greater thrill than that. I think that you just made somebody's life better. And like, they might get to go home at 4:30 instead of 7 because you made their life easier. I just audited a content process the other day. I was on the phone with a customer and I looked at the process they go through to publish something in a CMS that was built by somebody else. We're being asked to kind of come in and analyze it. And I felt so bad for this woman because, first of all, I maintain that 50% of her salary is simply inefficient rework. And I felt like this woman can never get ahead. She's going to spend so much time doing things that really provide her no satisfaction and are incredibly inefficient. And then I got to thinking, how many times could she not go home at 5 o'clock? Because she stayed till 8 o'clock to mess with this thing. I can impact that woman's life in a very, very positive way through a weird skill that I have around CMS. And this is going to sound dumb, but I think about this. I can impact her kids' lives. I can make her husband's life better. I can make everybody associated with her better because I can make her happier and I can give her more time and I can get her out of the office at 5 o'clock. And this is where I get delusions of grandeur. And I'm going to be the Johnny Appleseed of CMS and I'm going to make everyone's life better. I don't know if that ever happened or not, but in my head, it was a great vision.
No, I mean, it all circles back to what you explained that you're proud about, right? And this brings you joy, which I think those two parts of being proud of something and having joy in the job that you do is critical.
My heart is with editors and content creators. I am one myself. I've done a lot of writing. I've created a lot of content. My heart is with those people. And how can I make their lives better? Those are the people that I'm working for, whether I work for a product company or a services company. If you are sitting in front of a keyboard and you are creating content, because I love content, I believe in content. I think it's a great way to bring people together. I want to make your life easier. I want to allow you to create better content. I want to allow you to create more content. That you are my people. You are why I get out of bed in the morning. And this is starting to sound ridiculous, but it's true. I genuinely feel it. This is not an act. This is where my head is at.
No, I really appreciate that. And before we wrap up, I have a few random questions for you.
All right.
Are you ready?
I feel like our relationship is one series of random questions.
Yes, whether texting or voice or video.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. Important things that I ask almost everybody, and these will be the 4 questions that will end each podcast.
All right.
Aisle or window on an airplane?
Aisle, always. I'm 6'4", so aisle for sure. And then if I'm on a wide body, a 2-aisle plane, I want an aisle in the center section of seats. So I want an aisle on the end of the center section. And the reason why I want that is because
left or right?
I don't care. But if you're on an aisle in the center section, then the people that need to get past you, if they need to get out, have 2 different ways to go. So there's like 50% less chance they'll bug you. And then I'm always self-conscious. I don't want to fall asleep and have to have someone wake me up. That's like super awkward. I probably look like an idiot when I'm sleeping. So I don't want to have someone wake me up. And then ideally, if I can get it up against the bulkhead, I don't need first class, but if I can get against the bulkhead, that's great because then someone can get past you without making you do anything. So no one has to wake me up and I don't want to look like an idiot.
I'm glad you have put a lot of thought into this as well. All right. You have a
You
red
flew
eye.
me all around the damn world, Justin. You sent me everywhere all the time. I got very used to it.
Yes. All right. Let's pretend you have a red eye tonight.
Okay.
How do you prepare for the red eye? There's people that get on the time zone that they're going to days in advance. And then there's other folks that get as much sleep as possible, don't change their day. How do you prepare for a red eye?
Utterly no preparation at all. In one sense, I just kind of have surrendered myself to the fact that jet lag sucks and that's just going to suck and there's nothing you can do about it. The only thing I do is that I will book a hotel room checking in the night before. So if I leave like on a Saturday from O'Hare and I'm flying to London, I don't want to get to London and have nowhere to go till 3 p.m. I want to get to London and be able to check in right away. So I'll tell them, I'll book a hotel room for Saturday night and said, look, I'm not going to show up till like 6:00 Sunday morning. That's the only thing I'll do. But otherwise I just submit myself to fate.
All right. Favorite book or show that you've read or seen in the last year? And you can answer one of each.
We could be for hours on this one. The best book I read.
Single favorite. Yeah.
Okay. Best book I read in the last year was a book called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And with that kind of title, you think it's going to be a very, very black and white self-help title, but it's not. It's probably the most deep philosophic book I have read. It is about the fact that we try to maximize and optimize our time, but there's only so many hours in the day, and we just need to be better at picking what we do, and we need to be able to go easy on ourselves. We keep pretending that we can get so much done if we just manage our time right, and that's not necessarily true. The book was just incredibly meaningful. I've recommended it to a ton of people, and everybody who's read it has absolutely loved it. For shows, I'm gonna say two, and they're both weird foreign comedies. Well, not really foreign. Letterkenny was a Canadian comedy, and it was about, I'm going to use the phrase redneck. I don't know if that's pejorative, but I'm from South Dakota. There's a lot of rednecks around here. That might be pejorative. I don't mean it to be, but it's about these people live in the backcountry of Canada. And it's about community and friendship and love and relationships. And it's incredibly profane and vulgar, but it's just a very meaningful show, and it's hilarious. And then the other one is a Dairy Girls, a comedy out of Northern Ireland, and it's about schoolgirls during the 1990s. It's a comedy, and it's very, very funny, but it's also an interesting history lesson about the end of the Troubles. I was in college, a political science major, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, so it was actually kind of neat to see that. 18 episodes, 20 minutes apiece. You could binge it in a weekend. Absolutely worthwhile.
I thought your description of 4,000 weeks was going to take 4,000 weeks. All right, last question.
Don't tempt me.
What's your stance on Oxford comma?
Oh, absolutely. No question. If you don't use it, you do not belong in civilized society.
Well,
I wrote, there's a templating language called Fluid, and I literally wrote the filter extension called Oxford that will take a list of items and insert the Oxford comma. And if you don't believe me, I actually document it. It's one of the code samples on my website. That's how much I believe in the Oxford comma.
Well, on that, I think we should conclude. I want to thank you for joining the very first episode. Really appreciate your time, your wisdom, your guidance, and your stories. Really appreciate it, Deane.
I can say that I'm a hipster. I liked Justin's podcast before Justin's podcast was cool.
All right. Thank you, Deane.
Thanks.